you again have been right at the middle of this story, covering it for the many for Sports Illustrated, Washington Post, so on and so forth, USA Today, right? You've been at
Yep.
you've talked to NFL management. You've spoken to players. You even said that there's going to be a burst of activism that's coming this fall. We know it. We all know it. The NBA will knock on wood, go first because they will open up and tip off in July. I mean, it's entirely possible baseball does, but that we'll see a burst of activism for the NFL this fall. How would you counsel if they said, "Hey, Robert Klemko, you've spoken to everybody here. I put in your plate." How would you counsel everybody to figure out what to do, Robert?
Yeah. It's a good question, and it's a story I'm actually working on right now. I mentioned I spoke to a general manager yesterday, and he talked about what he's done over the last 3 weeks. And, he took the phrase Black Lives Matter very literally, and he called all of the black men and women that have mattered to him in his career and in his life, and called to check in and see how they were doing, but then also wanted to know what he could be doing differently. And some of those people were in his organization, some were not. And I think one of the takeaways that he came away with is that we need to sit down with players who may not be in leadership positions, who may not be one of our captains, but these guys that have these real life, tangible experiences with, police brutality, with, racial profiling, and talk to them about a plan. Because if it doesn't feel like everybody in our organization is included in this discussion, then we're never going to achieve any degree of solidarity on this thing. And I think when Ferguson and Baltimore were happening, a lot of the discussions that happened with teams were around, were between coaches and management and player leadership, and didn't involve every voice in the room. And I think if I were giving broad advice, I would tell these coaches, these general managers, these owners to try to make sure that everybody in the room feels heard.
Yeah, but don't you think that there needs to be a league-wide policy here? That that Team A says some stand, some kneel. I mean, we're gonna run through the same questions that we did in 2016 and 2017. Now, Robert, I mean, it's coming. We know it. It's here already. Drew Brees had to address the president himself on Twitter to say, "Don't make this a wedge issue." So we know it's coming. The question is, though, you can't have Team A say some stand, some kneel, and Team B is like those who don't want to stand, stay in the locker room, and Team C is like everybody's standing. Everybody's out of the locker room and everybody's standing. Like we can't have a repeat. So the question is, can there be on ownership side some new committee that's formed as a listening committee? I don't know what you call it, player relation committee, and then have a players group of players sit down with these owners and come up with it. And then this is what we're going to do as a league. And Roger comes out and says in a video, "This is what we're doing," and everybody goes and plays football. Amongst a pandemic on top of all of it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, don't you think that's what has to happen?
I don't think that the NFL will want to go out there and say, we're going to put together a committee and create a rule and say that players have to stay in the locker room or players can protest. I think that they will say, we're going to have the national anthem before games. We're going to have the players and coaches out there. If you want to protest, you can. And I think that the networks will in turn say, this is still a hot button issue for us, and we're just not going to show the national anthem anymore. And that will be the establishment attempt to, quiet some of the criticism of what goes on during the national anthem while still trying to appease the players that are protesting. I think that's the middle ground that they will ultimately reach.